The next day, I called back the guy and asked him like to make me an introduction with like the HR department of the Boston Consulting Group, and I went through the very very tough, very selective interviews of the Boston Consulting Group, and every time they were asking me why do you want to work with us? Why? And every time I said, well, because I think it would make my wife happy, and I got the job.
Welcome to another episode of Prosper, the podcast of the Sioka Center, the Entrepreneurship Center at the Bush School of Business. We're the place where innovation meets personal vocation. I'm your host, Andreas Rebecca, joined as always by my colleague, Rebecca Teddy. Welcome, Rebecca. And our guest today is Pierre Ferragu. He is the managing partner at New Street Research, a boutique research firm advising investors in the telecommunications and technology industries. A very interesting person, and I look very much forward to speaking with him.
So after a career as a top Wall Street analyst, he ended up at New Street Research, helped to create that firm. But he's also taken on a new project, moved by the wild success of the stage production Bernadette the Musical, which is a show that's taken Europe by storm. So Pierre is undertaking to bring that show to North America. And we had the pleasure of seeing a preview of that, sponsoring that on campus in the spring semester here at Catholic U. So we're very jazzed about that too. So we'll talk about that later in the program. But for right now, we're just excited to speak to him. So welcome, Pierre Ferragu.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Andreas, for having me. That's a pleasure and an honor.
We always start with a warm-up question, Pierre. So we'll just start with what's the best thing you're reading these days?
Very good. So the one thing I'm reading at the moment is, oh my God, I'm blanking on the name of the book and the name of the author, but it's a French adventurer who's written a lot of books. And the last one I'm reading is about his decision to go and spend 6 months in a hut on the Lake Baikal in Russia from like early February to the end of the summer, and it's a very very impressive personal experience. To be just on your own in the face of like beautiful creation, and yes, and so like I'm waking up in the middle of the night and reading it. It's very very enjoyable.
That sounds like a page turner.
Is it like a survival story, like they have to hunt themselves, or they bring the food and just stay there?
He brings the food. Abad brings the food, plans to fish a bit because the Baikal is a very good place to fish, and he just lives. No, he doesn't survive. He lives very very simply in a like 90 square foot hut, but he does live here like with like interesting temperatures and very lonely. Like the closest neighbor is like 10 miles away with no road, of course.
Beautiful. There used to be do you know that, Rebecca? There used to be a famous TV series or movie about a guy who did this up in Alaska. He had a German name. He was like 90 when he left.
I don't recall it.
Yeah, and he lived up there. I should put that in. That's one of those. It's like your story that you're reading is so interesting. It's he filmed himself early on. It probably must have been the 70s and the 60s, but he filmed himself, and it's so peaceful and so beautiful to see how this guy lives. And he also didn't have to really rough it because the plane would come and give him some stuff, some more important stuff. But he built everything on his own, and it's just beautiful. And I presume in the Russian wilderness, it's even more amazing right now. Are you into camping at all? No, you wouldn't do this yourself, would you?
Well, I have like quite a significant background in like the French Scout organization. I actually even created like a French Scout group here in New York that has been is still very high passed on now the responsibility, but still very successful. And so I am actually I don't do that much anymore now, but I've had like some very very serious camping experiences, and I do I do appreciate a lot, living in the wilderness, having like a very close relationship to nature, and to just focus your day on not surviving but living. Like just what I like to tell people. I was, enrolling in the Scout organization is, like one of the things that it's not about doing, Scout activities. It's about being a Scout. Just being is a very important thing to focus on. And so when you camp, you focus on being much more than doing. You basically do nothing but prepare your food and clean up your place, and then you just sit and watch the creation. So yes, I like that kind of experiences a lot.
That's a good dovetail into just telling us a little bit more about your story. So you grew up in France and then lived in several other places in Europe and before you settled in New York. So just introduce everybody to your career and how you got to what you're doing now.
Okay, yeah. So I'll give you I'll give you a fun version of it. So um, I studied engineering without any like deep interest in the actual science of engineering, but a deep curiosity, like a lot of excitement to, to understand hard sciences. And so when the time came to find my first job, um, I first accepted an offer from the company that was sponsoring my sailing activity. I was very actively sailing with my college, and I had like a main sponsor, and they offered me a job, so I took it without even thinking about it. And then I did my first couple of years more like in sales, in business development. And then one evening, uh, we went to a dinner party with my wife. It was in Stockholm, in Sweden. And at the dinner party, there was a gentleman slightly older than me, maybe a few years older than me, that was working at the Boston Consulting Group. And we talked a lot about what he was doing, and I asked him a lot of questions about his job and what he was doing. And I could see my wife was very, very intrigued and interested in the conversation. And when we walked back home, I told her, "Well, that sounds like a great place." And she said, "Yes, yes." And then I looked at her and I said, "You would like me to work there, no?" And she was like, "Oh, yes." And I was like, "Okay." The next day, I called back the guy and asked him to make me an introduction with the HR department of the Boston Consulting Group. And I went through the very, very tough, very selective interviews of the Boston Consulting Group. And every time they were asking me, why do you want to work with us? Why? And every time I said, well, because I think it would make my wife happy. And I got the job. Okay, so serendipity is good. It's good to believe in serendipity. And then I guess I spent about 10 years at BCG. Had an exhilarating time with fantastic people, very creative, very smart, very hard worker. I learned a ton. And then when I was at BCG, first I started in Paris. I spent some time in Warsaw, in Poland. Then I moved to London. I won't tell the whole story, but I moved to London in an exact same situation because my wife found a job there. And then I went to the management of BCG and said, well, my wife is moving to London. So do you want me to commute every day with the Eurostar, or do you want to transfer me to the London office? And they transferred me to the London office.
What was your industry in terms of, did you focus on something at BCG specifically?
Yeah, so I actually focused a lot on technology, and my engineering background and my interest for understanding how complicated technical things work helped a lot as a consultant to.
Yeah, so that was in the 90s?
And that was in the early 2000s, actually.
Early 2000s, yeah.
And then in London, BCG was in a building, the Devonshire House, on the 5th floor and the 7th floor. And on the 6th floor, there was another company named Bernstein Research. And one day I missed I hit the wrong button on
the elevator.
I ended up on the 6th floor and went in and saw this Bernstein Research. And then got a bit curious about it and researched it. And I thought, well, that's actually a very interesting job, because that Bernstein is doing equity research. So it's, instead of being a consultant for management, the management of companies, you're actually a consultant for investors in these companies. So and I thought it was very interesting, and so I contacted a friend who worked there, and I started interviewing there, and it put me in very awkward situations where I would get into the lift with like a BCG partner, and I would press 6, and they were like, "You got your floor wrong. We're going to 7, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're going to 7," and had to go to 7 and then wait and go back down by the staircase, and like showing up late at the interview and telling the story. And so I moved really from this job of trying to understand business dynamics and help management teams deal with them, to doing exactly the same for investors. And I loved it. It's a very, very intellectual work. It's you really spend your time researching, trying to figure out what's happening in the world, things that are very tangible, very practical, like why is a company gaining market share, why is a company losing market share, why are margins going up, going down, and it's very, very, very a very exciting job. And after about 10 years doing that job at Bernstein, and I moved from London to New York during these 10 years with an even more silly, story. And I ended up moving really out of serendipity to New York. And I guess like 7 or 8 years ago, like in 2017, I started writing research for investors about electrification, like the fact that everything was becoming electric and that it would have very, very deep, very significant implication for technology infrastructure. And then I started writing research about artificial intelligence. And at the time, not that many people were writing research about artificial intelligence, maybe nobody. And I felt, um, you know, doing good research on these topics probably required going independent and starting like a new business, a new company, because when you do research in a place that has been doing research for many decades, you have a very siloed organization. So if you want to do research about a car, you need to speak to the car analyst. If you want to do research about semiconductors, you need to speak to the semiconductor analyst. And understanding electrification was about understanding cars and understanding semiconductors at the same time. And I thought it would be the best way to do that would be to do it independently. So despite being at Bernstein, which is probably like the most like the most recognized like research company on Wall Street, and having like a very safe and very comfortable position there, I thought it was a good time to actually give it a try and risk everything and just drop everything and start on my own. And then it has been really what has kept me busy in the last 7 years, and really it was great fun.
Pierre, when you look at this, so I'm when I think of you, I think of like George Gilder, right? Who writes about technology and companies and which one works and which one doesn't. And I have to say that's very fond memories, because George Gilder was the first person who wrote positively about the first company I was with, about FTP. But everybody said this is a losing technology, and George was the only guy who said it was going to work, and it did. So, but what's interesting for me is to see. So to me, what you did at BCG and what you did at Bernstein and what you do now is the same thing, because you're researching companies in a way saying, how would this work better? Except with BCG, you were helping the company actually do it better. Now you're just saying, look, this would work better, and if they do it, then it goes up, and if they don't, it goes down. But how much of that? So you're now no doubt an expert on the technology development stuff. How much of it do you look exclusively at technology, or you look at the management style and the culture and the strategy of the environment of the company as well? Or you just say, look, this is IP technology, this is going to go somewhere? Or how do you do that?
It's a very, very good question. So I look, we look, it's like really like a teamwork. We look at technology and we look at business dynamics. So more like at a system level. So I am also a sociologist by background. And so we look at how an ecosystem is doing business, basically, and what's the underlying technology. And we really bridge the understanding gap between the two. Um, you know, why is this company gaining market share or losing market share, expanding margin, seeing margin coming down, or having a better margin than competitors? And how does the technology explain that? And it's always an adventure to figure that out, because it's never just, oh, because they have a better technology. It's because historically they started doing things this way, and they created a community, and they had people developing I don't know, like certain software, and started using the technology to do some certain things. And then that creates like an environment in which people behave in a certain way, so are using a certain, like, for instance, like platforms, etc. And once you've really outlined the whole interaction between how people behave and how the technology influences the way people behave, and how people's behavior influence in return the technology. And that can become very complex, because you have like for instance, like the hardware technologies, and you have the software technology. Then you have the behavior of people who develop the technologies, and the behavior of people who create products with the technologies, and the behavior of people who use the products. And when you integrate this whole perspective, you end up with a picture that have like a good explanatory power. It explains relatively well what's happening in the market. And once I have that, I bring that to my client. And your question, which was how much do you look at management and management quality, people, etc., I do actually not, almost never. But I always tell my clients, that's your job.
Uh-huh.
So I give you the background, I give you the context, I give you the tools to understand how the field is working. But then at the end of the day, I am not the investor. You are the investor, and you are making the investment decision. And the one piece on which I don't really help you with my research is actually like the human factor. And so, because I write all this research, I speak to a lot of people, I end up knowing individuals like CEOs and management teams, and I know their background, their history. So I end up talking with my clients a lot about the human factor, but I never research it per se.
Very interesting. That's like a good signal even to investors about what is and what isn't their responsibility, and what they should rely on others for.
Yes.
Very interesting. So let me actually interject here. This is fascinating, and I always hate to interject, but it's my job. So let me interject with a quick sponsor acknowledgement before we come back to more of our conversation with Pierre Ferragu. Friends, if you're enjoying this episode, please express that by subscribing, leaving a great review, or maybe leaving a comment or question or suggestion for a future episode. We love to hear from our listeners, and we are entirely donor funded, so we rely on your support. Also, have you heard that the Bush School of Business at Catholic University just launched a brand new MBA? It's an accelerated 9-month, 36 credit hour program, especially for recent college graduates or for people with less than 5 years of professional experience. It's rooted in Catholic teaching, and this program equips students with management expertise, hands-on business experience, and an ethical foundation to use business as a force for good. Find out more at mba.catholic.edu or click the link in our show notes.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with tech industry analyst Pierre Ferragu, who is also the producer of Bernadette, the musical. Pierre, I'm so intrigued by how a tech mogul like you came to be involved in musical production. Is it? Do you have some strong musical talent, or how does this story make sense that you're so much into technology, and here you are bringing a musical, being a producer of a musical in America?
There's a like me, spoil the punchline. The story doesn't make any sense at all. So I like that you ask me about my musical talent or my interest for music and for musical. So before getting involved in Bernadette, the musical, I had been to watch a musical only 2 or 3 times in my whole life.
Well, so we can't say you're an expert at musicals. You've
Exactly.
seen two.
Beware, I'm a former management consultant, so I tend to promulgate myself as expert of everything, of anything. So I sing only at mass and always out of tune. So I have nothing to do with music. The only thing I could say is that I've always had like um, a longing for having an influence on culture, on this idea that when you look at how culture, and especially like mass culture, is actually always like seeking a line of least resistance, and many people are actually very, very, very active in coming to the culture with an agenda and having an influence on minds and hearts through culture. I've always thought there was something missing of like trying to have this influence on culture in a more positive way. And I was actually following with a lot of interest the adventure of the Chosen, Angel Studios, the Wonders Project, Sycamore Studios, all these people who were actually creating an alternative to Hollywood in the movie industry, and actually having a very positive impact on culture. So I had, I would say, some admiration for these initiatives. And so what happened is that one day at a dinner party again in France, I met a gentleman who was wearing a sweatshirt with like the face of Bernadette Soubirous, Saint Bernadette, on his shoulders. And I asked him, where did you find the t-shirt? And he told me the sweatshirt. And he told me the story that he contributed to the production of a musical on the life of Saint Bernadette. And that intrigued me a lot. And I am very curious. I am an analyst. So I asked him, for the whole evening, I asked him a lot of questions on how this came to life, how it worked, what the business model was, how successful it was financially, of course. And at the end of the evening, I told him, well, it's beautiful that you do that. It's exactly what we need to. Your experience is a proof that if you do it, it can work. You can make a show that is about the life of Saint Bernadette and make it successful. And so that's beautiful. And then I told him, well, if I can help in any way, I told him I had nothing to do with the music business, but if I could help, I would be very happy to help. And his partners called me back a few days or weeks later and asked me if I could help them bring the show to the US. And I offered them my help. I helped them, made some introduction, figured out like a few meetings for them, got them over to New York for a couple of days, and we did a few meetings. And I kept helping just out of, simply gladly supporting a project I thought was very, very noble.
Have you seen it by then? Where have you seen it first?
I had seen it just on like a video recording of it.
You're not live.
Not live, yes. And then I am an entrepreneur, so I like to organize things, to do things, and so I throw this idea that we could organize like a screening, like of a recording of the French show with English subtitles at the Shin Center in New York. And so we organized that. And I invited 350 people to come and watch the show. And before the screening, the French producer told me, well, I'm going to go on stage, I'm going to introduce myself and then introduce you. And then you can introduce Gad, like who was another producer present at the moment. And then then we can move to the screening. And the French producer goes on stage and says, well, my name is Roberto. I am like the French producer for Bernadette de Lourdes, and I'm introducing to you, Pierre Ferragu, who is like the US producer of Bernadette de Lourdes. And then I came on stage and I was like, well, yeah, okay, well,
By public, you became the producer by public acclamation.
exactly, yes. And so I wasn't asked and I didn't say yes. I just was put in a situation where I had to either shut up or say no. And I didn't say no. And so I didn't say yes. So with this long story, I want to make the point that it's not like something that comes from me. I'm not like passionate about Bernadette Soubirous. I mean, I went to Lourdes a lot when I was a kid, and I was like, wow, this is not like a fun story. I don't like it. I am not passionate about musical, about like the entertainment business, and I wasn't looking for a job, definitely. And so none of that came from me. And I question myself probably every day about why am I doing that? Why that's not my place? I am an investment analyst. I'm not like a musical producer. And every time I question myself, I always come back to the same answer, which is it's not coming from you. And so you can say no if you want, but then if you don't say no, you don't say no, and you let it be, and you keep going. And so that has been the story of this adventure for the last couple of years, which is that it's not coming from me. I'm doing my best. I'm putting all the talents I can into it, and all the energy and effort and hard work, and maybe I would say pain into it as I can. But it's not coming from me, and the whole adventure plays out and is progressing. And I'm very happy to see that it is progressing. And I really leave it as a calling that has nothing, marvelous or it's just like I was put in a position in which.
Yeah, but Pierre, you're not giving it enough credit here, because if I just may, so I don't remember who introduced us, you and I. I'm not sure anymore. But
Well,
anyway,
that's actually this gentleman, Thomas Joffrey, who was involved in the production.
so but you see what I'm seeing. So I'm Pierre and I met some maybe a half a year ago, and we started to talk, and we decided to bring him down to DC to do this at CUA and so on. What caught my interest, and just as an observer, Pierre, what I'm seeing is that, you know how it's famously grace builds on nature, and so God chooses a certain nature, a certain environment, and then puts his grace into it. And I think this is one of those cases. And the reason why it appeals to me is that a couple of things I want to clarify. First of all, Pierre is not just bringing a musical to the United States. He's actually, because of who he is and how he thinks, he's actually doing something much more profound and bigger. It's not a one-off. This is actually a way of, I'll let you explain it, but it's a way of creating experiences that bring the good, the true, and the beautiful to a much larger audience than just classical evangelization, if you wish. And he does it in a way that brings together, it's a very, very unique. It brings entrepreneurship aspects into a field that has no entrepreneurship in the usual way of doing this. And I think it's a classic example of your nature and grace, right? Because this is a grace-filled moment. When you saw this shirt, when they start to ask you, and you sort of slid into this without volition, in a sense, but the grace was added to it. But you are bringing your expertise to it, and therefore it is a very entrepreneurial project. Say a little bit about what you're actually trying to do.
Yes, absolutely. It's like the point I wanted to make is that it doesn't come from me. It doesn't mean I'm not all in in the
Yeah.
in the project, and it definitely doesn't mean I think I was the wrong guy to do this. I think it's working well, but it's really working well out of something that is much bigger than me, and of course I do contribute. And yes, I do that indeed. I reconcile this, providential encounter and providential trajectory with my my longing and the fact that I wanted to have a positive impact on culture. And the first thing I did was to be like, okay, so if I need to help bring like a musical to the US, I need to go to Broadway. And I spent a year trying to pull together a project to have Bernadette the musical played on Broadway. And I realized how Broadway worked, which is how Hollywood works, which is like, it's very atrophied, it's a closed circuit, it's always the same audience, always the same influencers, always the same distribution channels, the same economic interests, etc. And I could say that Bernadette would never work on Broadway. I was absolutely certain. So you see that my reason played a big role in it, because I said, no, we are not going to do Broadway. It's because I know it's going to fail. And so I kept working and, building out a team, finding supporters, people who could help one way or another. And I ended up creating this vision with this team that we need to create a completely different, platform ecosystem for that kind of entertainment to come to theaters, to come to cities and to markets. Exactly the same way Angel Studios created a completely alternative distribution model for The Chosen and many other productions. And so that's now what we are building. So Bernadette the musical is actually like a platform, a launch pad for studios, light on stage studios. And so it's another studios, bringing to the popular culture faith-based or faith-inspired positive value entertainment, but which is focused really on the stage, on like live entertainment. And I think it is something that is missing. It is something that can work, that can be successful, and in this idea. So I don't think it is an evangelization initiative, of course, but it's also like a business, like a business venture. It's a for-profit business venture, and really the venture is about if we can tour live entertainment in the country without going through Broadway, and build and shape an audience for these entertainment, we are actually potentially we have like the opportunity to create very strong franchises, and then we can exploit in movie theaters, on streaming platforms, on the internet, on YouTube, etc. And we can grow from there an additional, entity that can have a positive impact on culture. And I think the focus on live entertainment is really like the number one differentiation of the venture. This idea that it's in our highly dematerialized, like digital world, like it's relatively, it feels like relatively easy to be an entrepreneur on YouTube, in the movie industry, like to leverage streaming platforms, etc. But the reality is that there will soon, especially with AI, there will soon be like an overload of that kind of initiatives. There will be like too much content. It's going to be very difficult to be visible. Business models are probably going to be very highly challenged, and people are probably going to get bored of it. And I think bringing like live entertainment, that is something else than the always exact similar Broadway programs that comes every year in every city, like hitting the same audience, bringing like some diversity and alternative live entertainment in markets, can be very successful from a business perspective. And it's building out an ecosystem. So it's probably going to be very difficult for the first show, but then once the first show has been successful, it's the legacy of that show will be a platform that can carry actually additional projects, and that's the entrepreneurial dimension of what I'm doing here.
That's so fascinating, and it's very interesting to me that you're, in a way, somebody who early on was studying AI, and it's led you to understand that there's a coming longing for personal connection and live experiences, and maybe even simultaneous experiences that will give people an appetite, a renewed appetite for the stage, which I was a drama major, so I love hearing this. Tell us a little bit though, because I have to confess, when I first, you and Andreas and I and a colleague of yours had lunch a couple of months ago before we brought this kind of preview to Catholic U. And I have to confess, when Andreas first told me about it, I interiorly rolled my eyes because I just thought, Christian entertainment. It's just like you love it and you hate it at the same time, right? I love the idea of evangelizing the culture, and I hate the schlock that gets passed off as Christian. So tell us a little bit about why, like this, you want the show to be successful. That's part of the business model, and success is not going to mean we accept anything because it's in the name of Jesus. It's well intentioned, so we accept everything. And in fact, Bernadette has been tremendously successful in post-Christian Europe. Tell us why.
It's a very good question. So you have like it is changing with like the Wonders Project and others. Like you have higher and higher quality of like faith-inspired productions. And you've had examples of extremely successful productions like The Lord of the Ring or like the Narnia series of movies that were deeply influenced by faith and the values of faith that have been very successful. But Christian entertainment tends to be much lower quality, much lower budget, and yes, I think it's very important as an entrepreneur. I'm sure you teach that to your students to define your positioning in the market. And so, if your positioning in the market is to, provide your audience with a very strong and deep spiritual moment, it's going to be hard to compete with like an evening of praise, of prayer, of adoration, or going to mass. Actually, go to a beautiful mass, and you'll have your spiritual entertainment, if I may respectfully say. And then, if you want to have entertainment that touches like your humanity and you have to go for like an amazing story. And if you tell a story that is like about everything is perfect because that's the life of Jesus, or it's the life of saints, and you just want to show like a happy clappy people and couples who stay together their whole life and have a lot of children and all the children grow well, let's face it, that makes very boring stories. It's beautiful stories, but they are very boring. So when you do entertainment, you actually have to go into the depths of human nature, and then you can tell a beautiful story, but in which human nature is described and is played with all its richness. And if you want entertainment to be good, things have to go wrong and then get better, and you need to have like ambivalence and a lot of things like that. So as a matter of fact, I would have never, showed that much interest, or I would have said no if it had been like kind of like like a parish play on Bernadette that is just about like Bernadette was a saint and she was like a beautiful saint. But the play is actually written and directed by an atheist, and an atheist who is actually has like a very tense and difficult relationship with the church. He struggles with a lot of the teachings of the church, and so he's like a very convinced and loud atheist. And when he was asked the first time, would you like to write a musical on the life of Saint Bernadette, he was like, "Are you kidding me? Like this is not me. You know who I am, right?" But like the main French producer, Roberto, said, "Well, go to Lourdes, spend a couple of days there, and tell me what you think." And Serge, the director, came back from Lourdes and said, "Okay, this little girl, her story, it's amazing. So I'm going to do the musical. But it is going to be about the little girl. It's not going to be about what you call the saint. It's not going to be about the Virgin Mary. And by the way, who saw the Virgin Mary? Only her. Okay, so we are not going to see the Virgin Mary in this show. Let's be very clear. So that's where the creation of the show comes from. And that's what is beautiful about it. There is like a faith-inspired willingness of bringing that story to life on stage. But then the job is given to someone who is not even not religious, someone who is an atheist, like a positively atheist. And then the show is about the story of this little girl who goes to the grotto of Massabielle. So you have to know, it's not usually well known in Catholic circles that Massabielle was a place of sin in Lourdes. It was a place where men would go to meet hookers. And she comes back, 14 years old, from that grotto, and she says, "Oh, I saw a lady in white, and here is what the lady in white told me." It's an unbelievable story. It's beautiful. And then, if you want to tell this beautiful story, the first mistake you want to avoid is to say, "Oh, so she saw the Virgin Mary," because that's not what the story was. She came back and said, "I saw a lady in white," and then people laughed at her, and said, "Oh, so you're telling me you saw the Virgin Mary?" And she answered, "No, I never said that. I saw a lady, and the lady didn't tell me her name." And the whole story is like that. And so when the story is told this way, then the show becomes captivating. It starts like you have like a little girl, she's 14 years old. She's been interrogated, and you're like, why is she into trouble? What's the problem? And then you pull pieces together, and you're like, okay, so she had an apparition, and people are upset, and they want her to say it was the Virgin Mary, but she just sticks to what she knows, to the truth. She says, I'm not afraid because I always only say the truth. And then when people told her, but why are you telling us this story? Did you really think we're going to believe you? She just said, well, the lady didn't ask me to convince you. She asked me to tell you. So she had like this very, very natural attitude of faith, of like the steadfastness of faith, like Kelsey Grammer, who is now like my co-producer, calls it. That is absolutely beautiful, and it's engaging. It's a great story. Any little girl will identify to the little Bernadette. Any dad of a teenager will identify to her dad. And you have a policeman who is struggling between recognizing the effect this little girl has on him. He's almost wondering if he's not falling in love with her. And at the same time, he's completely, he refuses, like the slippery slope to him of believing the story. And then you have a dad who's like, I can't believe this story because I'm not educated, I'm not smart, and smart, educated people around me tell me it's unbelievable. But at the same time, I love this little girl. And so what's the meaning of truth? And what's the relationship between truth and love? And then the dad simply says at some point, well, I love you and I can't love a liar. So I guess you're not lying. And he doesn't say, okay, it's true, it's Our Lady, or you saw it, or it was real. He just says, you are not lying. Nothing else. So that makes that with like there is nothing like it's all about the things that are much broader than just like uh, the underlying religious story.
Pierre, I can't tell you enough how absolutely happy I am to know you and to watch prima fila. I get first row to watch how you're driving this, and we are so happy to be affiliated with you. This could go on. We're running out of time, but thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
We do have to say one little give Pierre. He's an entrepreneur, and he's telling this great story, but he's trying to bring something to North America. So we have to give you a final word to let our listeners know how they could help you if they're interested in bringing this show, which I have seen snippets of and am won over. I was afraid it would be schlocky. This is not schlocky. This is really a beautiful show that is aimed at, I would say, pre-evangelization, because it just sinks into the heart and touches people with beauty. And let's see what the Lord does with that from there.
Exactly. So yes, in order to help, like I think we have a website. It's bernadettethemusical.com. It's very easy to go on the website. On the website, there are a couple of things you can do at the moment. One is to register, just to leave your name and your email address and your where you live, so that we know where there is an interest for the show to go, and we are building the tour, and we are using the data this generates to do that. So please do register and ask for the show to come to your city. You can also register and just join our team Bernadette. It's we're trying to build like a group of hardcore supporters who will help us get the word out and promote the show and make sure that the lack of visibility we'll have, because we don't come from Broadway and we are not like one of the mainstream Broadway shows, is going to be vastly compensated by local activism and grassroots marketing. So we need your support for that. Then the venture is already well advanced. We are very well funded, but we are going to continue to raise money. If you have an interest in investing in that venture, in Bernadette the musical, you can reach out to Andreas and Rebecca, and they can put you in touch with me. And like if you are like I would say an accredited investor, and if you're just interested in contributing in more of in a symbolic way, keep an eye on our website. And in the next few weeks, we're going to open a crowdfunding initiative to give people the opportunity to support the initiative this way as well. And keep an eye, and if we do our work well, you will see the show come to your city soon.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And we will, as always, put links in the show notes to all of these resources, so that in case you didn't jot them down as he was speaking. And we'll also put the trailer to Bernadette in the show notes, so you can check out at least the beginnings of the musical for yourselves.
Well, that's all the time we have today, friends. Thank you for joining us. We're grateful for your support, and until next time, we hope you prosper.